Hey, Ahmed, how are you?
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fantastic. It's great to see you. I would love to start by saying a huge thank you for everything that you and also the kind of wider NIM team as an organization are doing to really kind of fight for privacy and especially as a community kind of fight for Ukraine in the information space during the wartime. So yeah, I mean, feel free to introduce yourself and also NIM, and really looking forward to seeing the talk.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, CJ. So my name is Ahmed Kapoor, and I am General Counsel at NIM Technologies. NIM is a Swiss privacy startup, and we've built a cryptographic network that keeps your network communications safe and secure, even from the most sophisticated adversary. And so my slides are up, I think. I want to, of course, thank the conference organizers and Encrypted for inviting me to speak and inviting me to speak about the importance of individual privacy in realizing a transparent society and the importance of cryptography in achieving the individual privacy that's necessary in a digital world. And of course, we'll relate this all back to wartime. But before we sort of move on, I just want to say that it's quite humbling to be speaking to a room full of Ukrainians and people in Ukraine about privacy and transparency in crypto. And it's a topic that I'm very passionate about, but really your struggle currently is one that I'm even more passionate about. For the next few minutes, before having a quick demonstration of Telegram running on our network, I just want to set the backdrop. And I want to do that by defining some of the terms that I think will shape the presentation. And that's because the concepts of privacy and transparency sometimes feel a bit counterintuitive initially. So think about when we think about privacy. In the individual sense, we typically think about the control of information, the exclusion of others from accessing and controlling your information. And this is actually quite intuitive, right? We close our curtains, we close our doors, and we do so to keep out potential threat actors. The same, of course, goes for the government and government surveillance, right? And the same will apply in both digital and physical contexts. On the other hand, transparency in the organizational sense is typically will signify something that means openness to public scrutiny. And transparency then is often thought of as an antidote to hypocrisy, an antidote to corruption, and a solution in that a solution to corruption actually requires calling out the corruption and exposing it to the public. And because accountability that transparency facilitates, it's often thought of as the transparency is often thought of as the currency of trust in modern society. And so how do we build that trust, and why is privacy important to that? Privacy is important to realize a transparent society because no one should fear any form of retaliation for revealing government or corporate abuse, or just general abuse, right? No one should fear that retaliation, and a huge part of that retaliation has to do with the ability to track those that are revealing sort of damning information about those in power, governments in power, occupiers, and so on. And I think nothing really symbolizes that more than whistleblowers. And here we have a shot of my colleague, Chelsea Manning. Nothing sort of exemplifies that more than the documentation of police brutality. And privacy facilitates that documentation in a manner that will curb retaliation. And of course, nothing facilitates or exemplifies that more in this context and of particular relevance here in Ukraine than the collection of and documentation of war crimes, right? And so if you are documenting war crimes that are occurring in Ukraine, you will probably want to make sure that you're not going to be traced and hacked and then potentially killed, right? So it is a fact that we do, at least in the United States, we do kill people based on metadata through targeted killing, and without a doubt, I have no doubt that the Russians would and do the same, given the same capabilities. So how is it that we in crypto are trying to help realize a transparent society? And more to the point, what does crypto have to do with individual privacy, right? Well, the reason that crypto or cryptography is needed for individual privacy is because the internet is broken. And that is to say, the security of the networks that carry our communications, the internet, that's largely been ignored by cryptographers and security experts over the years. The focus has instead been on the content of messages, the content of data that's stored on our hard drives, on our phones, and so on. Importantly, just one moment. Now, of course, the security of the networks that carry our communications has largely been ignored. The focus has been on other sort of components, whether that's at the other layers of the communications stack. Over time, what has happened is that traffic analysis has become the sort of bread and butter of communications intelligence, right? Rather than looking at the content of messages, it has become more important for governments and sophisticated adversaries to look at the metadata that's generated as we surf the internet, as we send our messages, and so on. And as a result, and perhaps due to a combination of these factors, the factors being, of course, the lack of attention on the network and the focused attention on content, no existing solution can defend against NSA, private companies, or cyber criminals with sophistication or with the sophisticated computation capabilities that rise to the level of a nation state, and increasingly that are not. Increasingly, that level of sophistication is not even required. So before the NIM network, there was no solution that was capable of defending against the NSA and private companies and so on. Indeed, even the technologies that offer what we would consider the gold standard in messaging and transactional communications, technologies like Signal or technologies like shielded Zcash, even those technologies, even those protocols, the protocols that underlie those technologies, even they will leak metadata at the network level. And that metadata can then be used to identify really important information, such as who the sender was, where they were located, the time it was sent, or the intended recipient. And of course, this creates pretty big problems for us. So in general, the greater number of messages that are observed, right, the greater the information that can be inferred. And actually, I should add just one more point here. Metadata or traffic analysis can be performed even when the content of the messages are encrypted, right? So if you're using SSL or any other layers of the communication stack that are protecting you, right, it is probably the fact or probably the case that you're leaking metadata irrespective of using those privacy-preserving technologies. On top of that metadata that's being leaked, of course, governments are collecting or adversaries are collecting that data and running analytics on top of them. They're capable of intercepting communications that are encrypted, running big data on them, and generating potentially very high value intelligence. The slide that I've shown here is basically something that I did up shortly after the Snowden revelations, just to demonstrate how a state might be able to collect information using both means that are using both means that are jurisdictional, like from their ISPs, the ISPs that are located within the state or upon which they can assert jurisdiction, and also using other mechanisms such as tapping the internet backbone or hacking foreign service providers and so on. The bottom line here is that metadata is everywhere. Every one of these lines that you see going down contain some form of metadata, and even if the communications are, the content of communications and data are encrypted, that metadata typically is not. And that is crucial and essential to intelligence gathering and analysis. Of course, because the greater the number of messages that are collected, or at least because it's the belief that the greater number of messages that are collected generate better analysis and better sort of results. That is why the countries and adversaries are sort of incentivized to collect all the information. Now let's talk about the solution that we've got here at NIM. At its base, our solution is a decentralized, incentivized mixnet with private credentials. The core of this technology is the NIM mixnet, and the NIM mixnet takes data from ordinary users, mixes it together using encryption to make everything look identical. In doing so, it protects people watching the network, along with the metadata surveillance and any sort of IP tracing that might occur. The NIM network is scalable, it's latency tunable, and it applies to any messaging communication and not just those on decentralized applications and not just those that are financial in nature. Again, our network it does not discriminate in terms of the content of messaging or transactions that are encrypted. Basically, it applies to all messaging traffic, much like the Tor network. And the combination of 4 features in the NIM mixnet make it like no other privacy network known at this time. The first is that traffic that enters the mixed network, the mixnet, is routed through multiple nodes to unlink the origin and destination of the transaction. This is very much like Tor. The second feature is cover traffic. The NIM network provides analysis by adding dummy traffic, it evades analysis by providing a dummy traffic in a manner that actually makes it impossible to trace back the origin of communications by using timing or volume correlations. And I'll show that to you just in a moment on a really cool slide. The third feature is timing obfuscation. Packets leaving the network do not match in timing in terms of when compared to packets that enter the network. And then finally, it is horizontally scalable. Unlike blockchains, the mixnet itself can expand to allow for more traffic, just like our World Wide Web. Now, here is a slide that shows a quick comparison with centralized VPNs and a quick comparison with the Tor network, right? And so looking at the first row, we see that VPNs try to solve the problem of traffic analysis by creating a point-to-point tunnel that encrypts the person's personal data and masks your IP address. But the issue with VPNs, of course, is that they are centralized. Centralized VPNs require users to put a great deal of trust into a third party. To do this, to put that trust, knowing full well that even the most reputable and reliable centralized VPN providers can be vulnerable to hacks, exploitation, or government interference in the form of compelled assistance or subpoena-like legal devices. right? So that's the VPN. For VPN, you're basically moving your trust to a centralized entity, which is the VPN provider, often a provider which you have no real background information and that has pretty opaque type policies and other sort of issues. Now, on the second row, we have the Tor network. The Tor network tries to solve the problem of traffic analysis by sending messages through a number of decentralized nodes, right? So here in Tor, we've got decentralized nodes, the 3 hops, right? And while Tor encrypts user IP information, the protocol itself doesn't hide other metadata that can be discovered by looking at the timing and the volume of the packets leaving the network. Now, just to kind of step back, what do I mean by metadata? I mean data about the data, right? And there is data about the data in the form of, well, what is the timing of these packets coming out of here, right? The timing of these packets, that's metadata, right? And the volume of these packets is also metadata. And because Tor does not obscure that metadata, it is subject to an attack that essentially de-anonymizes the communication by doing correlative analytics between the volume and timing patterns of packets going into the network, packets going out of the network. Of course, you don't have to capture all the packets going in and out of the network, just a small portion of them in order to have significant or mathematically significant capabilities of identifying the source and destination communications, right? And so this renders the Tor protocol vulnerable to adversaries with access to tech and computational resources that, frankly, are no longer the exclusive domain of superpowers like the United States. What I mean by that is that the ability to conduct tracing on the and even sophisticated networks like the Tor network are increasingly being able to be run, or able to be the tracing is able to be run by states that are not as sophisticated as the United States, and even corporations like a Facebook or like a Cisco certainly have enough resources and power to trace communications, and of course Russia. A key actor in this space, right? So let's look at the NIM network on the third row, and I'm very conscious that I have 8 minutes left. But the NIM network mixes traffic through multiple nodes, much like the Tor network. The network also adds that cover traffic, the dummy traffic that I was just talking about. And it shuffles the packets in a manner that obfuscates both the timing and the volume of the packets leaving the network. What this means is that the packets leave anonymized, looking exactly the same, right? And with the same exact timing. And as a result, that renders that outgoing traffic theoretically untraceable, right? So my next slide is a deep dive into the MixNet. And here I'm actually, given the time, just going to skip through this. We have a user out here. We've got the packets that you are meant to send out into the world. Then you have a local client that essentially changes those packets into Sphinx packets. What are Sphinx packets? They're all the same size, and they're being sent now to the internet. They get sent out into the MixNet. They go through multiple hops where the cover traffic is added. And now we've got, obviously, timing obfuscation from the MixNet as well. And the packets leave the MixNet anonymized, essentially the same size and with uniform timing. And this then goes to your apps and services and your friends and so on. Now, it's important to realize, of course, that the NIM network is just one layer of the privacy stack. It's the network layer of the privacy stack. And that's why we have introduced as well NIM credentials, ZK NIMs, essentially privacy preserving credentialing technology that I don't believe I'll have time to get into in the next 6 minutes if I want to show my demo. So we will move on. Here, now, next I'd like to demonstrate for you the NIM Connect app. Essentially, the NIM Connect app allows different apps to sit on top of, it's essentially a client called NIM Connect, and it allows various apps to sit on top of it. And what it does, if we go back a couple slides, is it will take those, it will take your standard UDP or TCP IP packets, and it will then change them or formulate them into Sphinx packets for distribution into the MixNet. Right now, and going back here, and so you have an application like Telegram, and that sits on top of the NIM Connect. We've also got Keybase and Electrum Wallet as apps that are, have been tested and released as working with NIM Connect. Why Telegram? Well, frankly, because we're trying to meet the Web3 community where they're at, right? And frankly, the Web3 community uses Telegram more than any other messaging application, and that's why it's running over the NIM Connect on our at this time, right? Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate a very cool demo prepared by some of our community members. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to, so this is a demo of connecting to the MixNet on Telegram and how to set up Telegram to run on the MixNet. If you want to view this demo at home, I've provided a QR code that you are welcome to follow just here. And hopefully the sound comes through. Let's do this.
This is a demo on how to configure Telegram and NIM Connect. After you have downloaded and installed NIM Connect, open the app and click on Connect. The host and port will now be displayed. After that, open your Telegram app, go to your settings, data and storage, and use proxy. Then, select SOCKS 5 and make sure the port details are the same as those generated by NIM Connect. Save the proxy settings in Telegram, and you're now privacy enhanced on the MixNet.
So guys, just as a quick sort of note on that, I ran this demo at I think halftime or 3/4 time, which means that you can set up NIM Connect and Telegram, or you can set up your Telegram to run on NIM Connect in probably less than 30 seconds if it's already downloaded. It would be terrific if we got some testers out there at the conference, and frankly, you'll be testing NIM Connect, but at the same time, you'll be evading government surveillance, which, it's a twofer out here, right? Just one more moment. Importantly, again, I want to emphasize that the NIM network is just one layer of the communications stack. It's a very critical layer. It's a very neglected layer historically, but you need to be sure that all other layers of the communication stack are also secure. And in closing, also, I want to emphasize that the existence of a hot battlefield and an illegal occupation, which is the current state right now in the Ukraine, frankly, only amplifies the need for our network communications, or amplifies the reality that our network communications are exposed, and really, really underscores the risk of surveillance, the risk of censorship, and the risk of manipulation of information, particularly by sophisticated adversaries. And whether that adversary is an industrial competitor, whether it is a corporation, whether it's a country that holds itself out as being democratic, or the exact opposite, the reality is that we have to protect our network communications in order to exercise or in order to fulfill a transparent society here and now.
That's great. That's great, Ahmed. Thanks for such a fantastic talk. I mean, maybe just one question, just really quickly, because I know we're running out of time. I'm super curious how this kind of stack can be useful when it comes to like documenting war crimes, especially if we consider that like evidence of war crimes being publicly persistent immediately might not be a good thing. Like we've seen, for example, like Russia like realigning their missiles based on social media posts. So I'm curious, does like encryption also play a role in that?
Yeah, so I think that whether encryption plays a role in that, well, like, so just two parts to that answer, right? So let me go kind of backwards. The first part is the use of Russia's use of public source or public source intelligence or open source intelligence to, to change their military tactical strategy, etc. Right? My gut feeling is that those people that are actually putting out that information and where the information is actually aiding the Russians, I'm not entirely sure what their threat model is, like what they are worried about. Right. So let's say I'm going to be the guy that's trying to, disclose information for the oppressor occupier to kill and further the genocide that's happening in Ukraine. Right. OK, well, I've gone ahead and done that. Right. Are we saying that, the existence of privacy preserving technologies are going to help me do that? Well, if that's the case, then the question is, well, what am I worried about right now? Now, flip it, and if I'm your standard Ukrainian or Ukrainian ally out there in the world, trying to either rectify, misinformation misinformation campaigns that are propagated by the Russian government, or even trying to establish fact out there, or even trying to document the war crimes that are happening today in Ukraine, right? I would imagine that my threat model is a little different, right? Because my adversary is a relatively sophisticated state that has no qualms about tracing me for the rest of my life and then getting the revenge over the next 30 years, right? God knows. So you don't want to be in that database if you're the ally of Ukraine that's documenting war crimes, but you have access to that information, you have access to the truth, and so on, right? So what you can do, and this is actually something that we were worked on together in a way, CJ, is we had a project at the Kiev Tech Summit last year. It was a hackathon project. And the idea was, it was called Anon Drop. And the idea was to run an app on top of the NIM network and using Filecoin, actually IPFS, where NIM provided the anonymity for individuals that wanted to document and upload evidence of war crimes. IPFS provided the sort of permanence of storing that, right? And in the middle, you need this one layer of image provenance, right? Image provenance essentially is what tells you whether or not that image is authentic, whether the person that took that photo took it at the time, staying in the location they were, and so on, right? There are some open source libraries, open source tools. I think Adobe has probably the most prominent one that's used by journalists and others. And I know that, big shout out to Starling Lab over at Stanford that's working with Ukraine DAO. Big shout out to Ukraine DAO as well. To document the existence of war crimes and to provide, I know they're doing some really excellent work on the image provenance end of that. So what they're trying to do is make sure that the courts will accept that authenticated information so they can actually, try Russian war criminals. I'm very sorry for that long answer.
No, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Ahmed, for such great insights. Pleasure to see you and hear from you as always. So yeah, thank you and have a great rest of the day.
Hopefully next time in person. See you later.
Let's do it.